Hello, everyone. Welcome to another day of Charm Chats and Happily Ever After Sprints, where we're going to get a chance to talk to fantasy romance authors all month. We've fifth day into the month, and so we have our fifth author today. We're going to play some games, talk about writing fantasy romance, do a writing sprint. I'm Shannon. I write under the pen name of ST Huston. You're here on my YouTube channel where I publish content about my writing and self-publishing, and I also do weekly writing sprints. I'm part of the Self-Publishing Tips and Tricks podcast, have been picked from Running to Write and Morgan Lee. And I'm the founder and conference chair of the AuthorTube Writing Conference, and that's now heading into its third year. Besides what I do here on YouTube, I'm a fantasy romance and YA fantasy author with a passion for writing about characters, broken characters who face adversity to become better versions of themselves. And there may or may not be dragons, but there is always love to find. And I am going to introduce my author. Today, I'm joined by Susan, writing under the pen name of SC Grayson. We're going to spend a little time learning about her writing and books and play that game, and then move into doing a half-hour writing sprint. So now let me go into her bio. SC Grayson has been reading fantasy novels since she was a little girl, and that has developed into a love of writing and storytelling. When she is not sitting in a local coffee shop writing and consuming an iced Americano, Grayson is a nurse working towards a PhD in nursing with a focus on breast cancer genetics. She lives in Pittsburgh with her loving husband and their 2 cats, who enjoy contributing to her work by walking across her keyboard at inopportune moments. The cats, not the husband. So welcome to my channel, Susan. Please take a moment to add anything else that you may want to tell the audience.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about all things fantasy romance and writing and books. And I am the author of the Talented Fairy Tale series, which includes Beauty and the Blade and Little Red Shadow. And I enjoy writing all sorts of different characters and conflicts, as long as there's a happily ever after.
I love that. We do have some questions, but before we do that, let's see who's in the chat and say hello, because I know there's been quite a few people who stopped by already. Also, I did pin the book at the top of the chat. If you guys are over there, you can see it. It's also in the chat. Her book, Beauty and the Blade. We're going to talk about that one a little bit here. Blind Sisters, hello, Nicole. How are you doing? Hope all is well. And Rachel, hello. She was our first author of Charm Chats and Happily Ever After Sprints. Hope you're having a glamorous day. We are.
Very glamorous.
Yeah. And Leslie, hello. Nice to see you. Hello. And Angela, wishing you all a great day and hitting the like button as I pass by. I appreciate that, Angela. And Nikki, hello. Hey, everyone. All right. So if you guys do have any questions for the author as we go through and we talk about her writing and her book, you can put it into the chat with a Q. You can do that anytime, even after the question and answer period, because we will come back to it and make sure that we answer all the questions. So the first question I've asked every author who's come on is, what drew you to writing in fantasy romance?
I was saying a little bit before we started, actually, that writing was something I kind of fell into by accident. I feel like I had the universal thing of I loved reading fantasy romance, and I was in a period of my life where I was reading so much of it, and I was reading all these books, and I remember talking to my sister, who's my biggest bookish buddy, and I was like, man, I feel like there's this book I'm looking for, but I can't put my finger on it. I can't find it. And she, a very practical person that she is, looked at me and she's like, you have Microsoft Word, you know how to type, make it yourself. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting solution. So I kind of just started writing with very, very little training or plan or no even intentions of becoming an author. And the next thing I knew, I had a book, and then I had some people read it and they're like, this isn't half bad. And then I edited it until it was less than half bad. And we went from there.
So was that Beauty and the Blade, or was that like a different book? I don't know which one was.
It's a different book. It's called Spears and Shadows. It has unfortunately been unpublished as of now, but.
And was that through, because we were talking backstage and I didn't know that you had started off as a traditional published author. Was that one went through a traditional publishing house?
Yes. Okay. And I recently transitioned completely to self-published. And so those books haven't been self-published by me yet. I want to do some work on them before they come back, but yeah. They hopefully will see the light of day again.
Yeah. And, I love that too. You said that your sister's like, well, you can do it yourself. And I think I've heard this advice before, is that if you can't find the book you want to read, then write it. So I've heard that before, that advice.
Someone else probably is looking for it too.
Right. Exactly. All right. So let's talk about your series, A Talented Fairy Tale series. Can you tell us about that and your thoughts of your inspiration and going into that? And Beauty and the Blade falls into that series.
Yeah, Beauty and the Blade is the first book in that series. And there are loose fairy tale retellings set in an Industrial Revolution era London with magical street gangs. So I kind of pitches the vibes of Bridgerton meets Peaky Blinders if there was magic involved.
It actually reminds me a little bit of Carnival Row. Have you seen that TV series?
Yes.
It reminds me slightly of that.
Yeah, it kind of has some of those vibes. And it was one of those lightning bolt ideas, honestly. You know, some stories kind of creep their way into your brain slowly and like amalgamate into something over time. This was one of those ones where it was like, I've always loved Beauty and the Beast. I mean, who doesn't? Like, and any Beauty and the Beast retelling is an automatic buy for me. Like, you know, one click purchase on Kindle.
Do you know about my latest book? It's also Beauty and the Beast.
It's because it's the best story.
Yeah. But this is epic fantasy, so it's probably, I don't know if you read epic fantasy, but
I do. I definitely love epic, but it was one of those things where, you know, I guess I kind of always knew I was going to have to write a Beauty and the Beast retelling at some point because they're just, you know, my favorites. And I was sitting there and all of a sudden the idea hit me. It's like, she's the daughter of the chief of police. He's the leader of a street gang, magical street gang, and they end up in a marriage of convenience. And that was just like, all right, that's what's going to happen. And the rest of the book formed from there. But it wasn't one of those stories I thought of on purpose. It was one of those stories that just like appeared and was like, this is what you're writing now. I'm like, oh, okay.
So I was telling Susan on the backstage is that I've been talking to the authors and they come on and telling them, you know, I've read whatever of their book or whatever. And I was like, this is how I'm not going to do it because I don't say what I mean to say on screen. But the books that obviously some of the authors I have on this month, I've read their books because that's how I contacted them. Like, hey, I read your book. I'd love for you to come on. And then some of you guys I found, and you were one that I think you found me probably through me putting it out there in the Discord group and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I had not heard of you, had not seen your book, but I'm trying to at least get into and read the beginning of all the books of the authors coming on so I know a little bit of what their book is about. And I didn't finish. Yesterday was newsletter day. I like writing my newsletter, but I still wait to like the last minute. And I'm sitting at my screen like, what am I going to write? And I didn't get it out to like 10:30. And I normally go to bed at 8:30. So I was like, okay, but I got to start this book. Yeah, I didn't go to bed until almost 1 o'clock in the morning. I could not put it down. I was like, stop reading, Shannon. You need sleep. I had to get up at 5.
I love it. I am one of those people. I'm a binge reader. Like I read a book in one sitting most of the time. I, you know, wait until I have a chunk of time and then I do it. I mean, my sister and I joke that a bookmark is a quitter strip. So I like to write books that are, you know, bingeable. You know, you sit down Sunday afternoon.
Even as I was getting ready this morning, I had it next to me. So every time I could look over, I was trying to read more of it. I think I'm over halfway through now.
Oh my goodness, you really made some progress.
Yeah, I love the story. I absolutely love it. So, which is this considered like a gas lamp fantasy romance? That's and so I've only read one other one and I liked it. And I thought, I didn't even know this was a thing. I should find more like these because now this is the second one. It's 2 for 2.
Yeah, I have a good friend that has written a really good one recently called House of Bane and Blood. So if that's your speed, I highly recommend House of Bane and Blood by Alexis Menard. Okay,
I think the one I read was the Lord of the Dance, and that author's coming on later. Allison Faye and Emma Faye. Emma Allison. Yeah, I like it. Amanda came in. Hello, how are you doing? And Nikki says, I'm writing a Beauty and the Beast retelling dark romance. So, which I love the idea. You know, I wrote a YA fantasy trilogy to start with. That's what I broke into with self-publishing because I've always loved fantasy and realized no one's really looking for 3rd century Ireland based on Irish myths. It's not really marketable. So I had looked into, well, what is big right now? And I looked at the K-Lytics reports, and this was 2 years ago, and fantasy romance was booming. And I thought, and I didn't want to just write what was booming on its own. I wanted to know that I could write it.
Yeah,
I thought, I could do this. I could write this. And then last year I pulled the report again, and that was dark fantasy romance. I'm like, really? I'm not writing dark fantasy romance.
I know my books are like haven't been dark in the past, but they're creeping darker. I think that's just, you know, following the trends. And also, you know, I like to read what people are talking about and what's out there, and
the influences a little bit, I think.
Oh yeah, I get influenced on social media all the time, and so then I'm like reading more dark romance. So of course, like that's what starts to creep into my writing. But I'm still definitely not the darkest fantasy romance out there.
Well, I got into Carissa Broadbent last year, and before Serpent Wings of the Night, or however that. I'm not really great with titles, remembering everything that's in it, but I read that book before it hit like TikTok big, And so when it hit, I was like, oh, I was ahead of the curve for once.
I know. I love when that happens.
But that's a dark fantasy romance. And so, but I was already writing this book that just came out. So, but yeah, so I don't know. I might do that later because I have my fantasy trilogy. It goes dark, very dark. So I could do it.
Yeah,
it's just not
hard
what I
to say. At what point is it dark fantasy romance, and at what point is it just fantasy romance with darker themes?
Right. Yeah. True. All right, let's move on to the next question, which is, what was your inspiration? Beauty and the Beast, obviously, for Beauty and the Blade, but was there anything else that inspired you or you thought of, especially with the setting that you chose?
I have this joke that behind every writer or reader wife, there is a gamer husband. And I didn't realize this at the time, but my husband loves the Assassin's Creed games. And I've written so many books that the setting has ended up being in the Assassin's Creed game that he's like playing at the time. So he was playing Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and it has this like beautiful, like gritty industrial London setting. And I was just so enchanted by like that idea of like the carriages and the street gangs and the smoggy skyline. And I think that kind of took me. And also it was at the time when Bridgerton was really popular. So all of that like slow burn period pining really tickled my fancy.
You're doing it well, because I'm like, okay, I love the story. I love the slow burn that's happening between the two characters, but I always keep thinking of just their last names. Connie and Nate, but they went by their last names for the longest time, and they just decided to call each other by their first names. But the slow burn that's there, I'm like, okay, come on.
I know the Pride and Prejudice style finger brush,
Yes, I love it. It's done well. I like it. So, and I think that's part of what I keep reading is like I want to get to the moment where they both realize, oh, there's something here.
They get there. I promise you. I'm happily ever after guaranteed.
Happily after. I know it has to be coming, and I love it. I love the books that it's supposed to come, but then you're wondering, is it actually going to come? And then it comes. Yeah. So,
yeah. Or like make it come at an unexpected time and unexpected way.
Yeah. Rachel, I guess she had stepped out for a minute because she said stepped away, got breakfast bar, streamed an autoplay, but it's all right. But yes, more B&B retelling. So she was the one that we had on at the beginning of the series of the Charm Chats and Happily Ever After, and hers is a Beauty and Beast retelling, but it's set in Sino-inspired theme setting. So yeah, more Asian influence, which I really liked.
I love that.
Me too. Okay. I'm trying to think. I think I've asked all the questions that are here on my list. Is there anything that we should know about the rest of the series? Like, I would like to know, I know you're doing more of a series. This feels like it's going to be a complete book. So does that mean the next book is going to be a different type of retelling, but set in the same world?
Yes, it is. The second book is called Little Red Shadow. I have it right here. And it is same world. So as you might guess, a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. And so, but different main couple. But like the overarching conflict in the world continues on.
Gotcha.
So it's more of an interconnected standalone, but I do highly recommend reading them
in order.
Because the Contessa and Nate from Beauty and the Blade definitely play pivotal roles. It's just they're not the main like point of view characters in it. And the third and final book is coming out in July, and it's called The Hood and His Thief, and it is a
Robin
Hood retelling.
Okay. I can see that. Can you hold up the cover again? Because I just thought, look at that next side by side. That is gorgeous. So you have like this mostly red with white, yes, and then the other one is mostly white with red, with black being a big complementary color. Yeah.
We're sticking with the red, white, and black. Red is my favorite color, and it keeps coming up. The books that were recently unpublished as well also had red covers. So I think I'm just gonna be the girl with red covers because I just love it so much.
My favorite color is blue, but my first series was green. I was like, I'm doing my next series. It's going to have blue, so I did Ice Dragons. It's not going to have blue.
Like we have to have a blue cover.
Yeah, we have to blue cover. But I do like that, the red, white, and black. It goes really well together. Thanks. Little Red Shadow is amazing. Highly recommend this series. Oh, so this must be one of your readers.
She's one of my street team members. She's one of my OGs. Hello. So glad you're here.
Well, I will definitely move on to that. It'll have to be after the month because I'm trying to read like 20 authors' books.
That is a lot. I know. I make all these author friends, and I try to read like one book of everybody's, so I, at least have something of everybody's under my belt. But then I have all these unfinished series, and I'm desperate to get through the rest of them.
Exactly. And I'm also part of a Black Author Tuber Readathon. So here on YouTube, there's a subset of us who are writers and or publishers. Like Rachel is also part of, and we call ourselves Author Tube. So a friend of mine is doing the Black Author Tube Readathon. She's done it every year for February, where we're reading books by Black authors who are on YouTube. So I also signed up for 4 books there on top of the 20 authors I'm trying to read. So a lot of books.
I'm to write anything.
Yeah, no, I've already decided I'm not going to write much this month. So, but I did write like 66,000 words last month. So I'm okay at the moment.
That's
I'll be okay.
A lot of words. My goodness. Okay. I don't write that fast.
Yeah. Hi, Martin. How are you? All right. So who is your favorite fantasy romance author?
Well, I have to list my favorite author of all time, even though she's not strictly fantasy romance. She's more YA fantasy, but Robin McKinley is number 1 author of all time for me. And then when it comes to strictly fantasy romance, I have so many. Sharissa Weeks, the author of The Witch Collector, is a big one for me. She's also a very nice person, in case you didn't know. And I also love Carissa Broadbent, that we were talking about earlier. I loved The Serpent and the Wings of Night.
When I read that book, I went and read everything she had. I've read everything she's published.
Yeah, it's great. And then I also have to give a shout out to Leigh Bardugo, because her books got me back into reading as an adult. So,
oh, okay. Yes, very ambitious TBR pile. I mean, I looked at when I've never like counted like my books, like I'm gonna read so many books or whatever. But when I looked at my what I read last year was 104 books I read. So it's doable. I do read a lot.
I used to keep really good track and had a spreadsheet, and my sister and I would do these we'd do like Book Academy Awards at the end of the year, where we had like different categories that we would compare who's your favorite female character of the year, like all of that stuff. And then when I started publishing my own books, I feel like I got very weird about how and what I read. I'm like such a mood reader, and sometimes I can't read anything too heavy if I'm trying to write something heavy, and it just kind of went off the rails and I stopped keeping track.
Well, I've never kept track. So this year I'm doing a little bit more, being more aware. That's not the word I used the other day. I can't remember what I said, but I'm just being more aware of what I'm reading and paying attention to it. So, all right. What is your favorite fantasy or romance trope and why?
I think my favorite has to be forced proximity. It goes well with enemies to lovers, but it pairs well with, other
forced
tropes.
marriage or marriage of convenience.
It pairs well with that one too.
Yeah.
I think there's something lovely about even if they like each other or don't like each other, when they actually have to be together long enough to see what's under the surface, and that's what makes them fall in love. It's like, oh, that's so nice that, these two people that you didn't think they could be compatible, when they actually had time to dig under all of whatever was going on, their circumstances, that it worked out. So forced proximity. And there's always, so many good subtropes. Only one bed, the classics. Yeah.
And I think my favorite probably will always be enemies to lovers. And every book I'm writing right now is enemies to lovers. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, if it's all hunky-dory, you don't have a story. So
yeah. All right, we're going to move into the fun and games portion of the show. And this will be before we do the writing sprint. And this is author's choice. Susan chose Two Truths and a Lie book edition. And I think we have a few. Both of us have brought some Two Truths and a Lie. And so we're going to share our statements and try and figure out which one is the lie. And we'd love for people in the audience to try and figure out as well. And make sure, play along, have some fun guessing with us. And do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
I can start. Okay. All right. So my Two Truths and I are: one, I got started by writing Star Wars fan fiction. Two, I staple closed all the spicy scenes in my books when I give them to my mom. And three, my husband names my book characters.
I feel like the staple the pages would be true. But I don't know.
Do you want me to tell you if you're right or not?
No, let's see what if anybody in the audience is going to say anything. Sometimes there's a bit of a lag too from our live to the feed on YouTube.
These are hard to come up with.
Yeah. So the lie, I'm going to guess the lie is your husband naming your characters. That's what I'm going to go with.
That's what your money's on?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, go ahead and tell us.
The lie is actually the stapling closed the spicy.
Oh no, that felt so specific.
I know. I have a friend that does that. And so I stole that from her. But no, my mom and my dad and everybody, my boss has read the spicy sections of my book. So I guess we're just going with it.
Yeah, just gotta go. I my book that I just published, so it was actually a Kickstarter book from last year, and we hit a certain stretch goal, dollar amount, that I was writing an alternate story. It's a alternate point of view story from the main book, but two other characters who had their own romance. Mm-hmm. And my book is basically clean romance, because I had not yet written a spicy scene when I wrote that book. Wow. But the alternate story, I finished it this week and got it out to my Kickstarter backers just yesterday. And I was in bed last night and I was like, oh my God, because there's spice in that one. I'm like, oh my God, people are reading this. People are going to read this. And they're going to like, oh my gosh, you're going to read this. I was like freaking out. I was like, it's done. It's out. You can't do anything about it.
My books are getting progressively spicier as I go. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have told my mom I was doing this, but she's cool.
All right. I'm going to do one of mine. So my current novel that I'm writing is A Curse of Wings and Gems. The love interests are a mermaid and a dragon. The story is set in a post-apocalyptic underwater city ruled by mermaids, and the story is inspired by The Little Mermaid. Did I make it clear which ones were the three?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, you did give us the hint that you write ice dragons, but is that a different series?
It's the same series. Okay,
so I feel like the dragon and the mermaid is true. And you also have a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so I'm thinking the retelling is true. So the post-apocalyptic setting one is what I am going to guess.
You're smart. Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
Use my deductive mind here.
Hi, Eva. Hope you're doing well.
Oh.
That was smart. All right. You want to do your next one?
Yes. Okay. So I wrote the first chapter of Beauty and the Blade while sitting in a biology class. 2, I read all of the Game of Thrones books that are out in 3 days. And 3, I have my bookshelf organized in rainbow order.
Well, I think you just said that, well, you don't write that fast. I don't know how fast you read. But to read all the Game of Thrones books in 3 days, that's pretty fast. So I think I'd have to go with that one.
That one is actually true.
Oh, wow.
I had knee surgery and I could not do anything. And I am a definitely faster reader than I am a faster writer. I also think part of that is because I work a lot. My
Leslie also thought number 2 was the lie.
Yeah, I know. My husband was like, you got to use that one to trick people into a lie, because that was wild. I think the rainbow order is a lie. That is also true.
Oh. So you did not write the first chapter of Beauty and the Blade in the biology class?
No, I was tricky. I wrote it in a stats class.
Oh.
So, yeah, I did. It was like I said, the idea hit me like a lightning bolt, and I did. And I was in grad school at the time, and I was sitting in a stats class, and I was like, wait, I got to write down this idea before it flies away, never to be seen again.
Oh, dang, I thought number 1 was the truth.
It was kind of the truth. It was just not a biology class.
It was not a biology class.
As you can tell, stats doesn't hold my interest.
Right. All right. Okay. I've secretly written a sci-fi space opera trilogy under a pseudonym. I've secretly written a monster romance with a contemporary setting. I've secretly written a soft sci-fi novel using technologies based on Nikola Tesla.
I feel like Nikola Tesla is too specific to be a lie. I feel like you wouldn't come up with that as a lie.
Number 2 is a lie.
I would agree. I think 2 is a lie.
Okay, that's the one with the monster romance and contemporary setting.
Yes.
It is truth.
My goodness. Okay, so it's the number 1.
Yes, it's number 1. Yeah. I've secretly written a sci-fi space opera trilogy under pseudonym, because I have written a soft sci-fi novel using technologies based on Nikola Tesla. Because he said that, yeah, he believed that if we vibrated our cells at the right rate, that we could live forever. And so I use that technology after a world war catastrophe. It's post-apocalyptic, basically. But yeah.
All right. So my next one.
Because I've read A Song of Ice and Fire series, but a 3-day binge would have given me an emotional hangover.
It did give me an emotional hangover, and I really don't think that I retained that much of it, but I just could not like move out of my bed, and I was so bored, and I was home alone, and the books were right there, so I don't think I slept. But so, I get on those things.
Behind me, I have the series there, and I have yet to get through the first book all the way. I cannot get into it.
They are dense.
Yeah, I can see that. So, all right, you've got another one?
I do. I am currently working on an alien romance. 2, I have a work in progress that was inspired by Reylo from Star Wars. And 3, I am planning a Tolkien-esque epic fantasy trilogy.
I would say number 3.
Do you think number 3 is the lie?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Any other guesses from people?
Yeah,
before I reveal the answer?
I hope alien romance is true.
Alien romance is true.
Oh, cool. Number 2.
Number 2.
And that was
Star Wars Reylo.
Star Wars.
And that one is also true. I am not planning a Tolkien-esque.
I think one is lie. Okay, so I got one right.
Yes, you did. You got it right. That I am not planning a Tolkien-esque epic fantasy trilogy. I will never say never, because every time I say I'm never going to do something, that I end up doing it. I didn't ever think I was going to write alien romance, but I got talked into it.
I never thought I'd write a monster romance in contemporary setting because I don't really like contemporary settings, but there it is.
I didn't think I was the hugest fan of contemporary settings, but my debut was actually in a contemporary setting. I don't know.
Yet. Eva says, yet you haven't done that. Well, see, because, I don't know, in my mind, Beauty and the Blade is set in an older time period, but it's still close enough to our time than say like, Middle Ages or further back in the epic fantasy setting.
Have that very traditional, like medieval type feel that a lot of fantasies do.
Right. And I think that's a huge jump from writing from like a gaslamp fantasy and moving forward into the future versus going backward. I think there's is so much more that I think that has to be done. So that I just felt like, well, that's a huge jump. It'd be easier to go forward than backward. Yeah,
I actually am going backward in my next series that I have planned to come out, that I announced. The book 1, Blood of the Sands, is coming out in September. But it's very desert inspired. Think more like Arabian desert than American Southwest. And I'm very excited for it.
What time period is that, like, in your head?
Pretty ancient. No technology. It's second world. It's actually my first dive into second world fantasy. So
mine's second world.
Yeah, it's odd for me not having a like actual time and place in my head.
But you can still like choose it. So like, even though mine's a second world, I chose 11th century, and I base everything off of the technologies of our 11th century.
Yeah, that would probably be good. It's very like, a lot of their technology is magically based. So, but ancient, pretty ancient.
We got a few comments here. Ironically, when someone else says you'll never, my Latin blood kicks in, and I offered them popcorn so they can sit back and watch me do it.
In the same way.
Totally a mood reader, Martin says.
Yeah. Yes, I am a chronic mood reader. Yay.
I usually am too. I mean, there are times when I force myself to read other things, but if I don't have anything that I have to read, then I'm totally a mood reader.
Yeah, me too.
And Amanda says, can't wait for that new series.
Yes.
All right, I guess I will do one more.
I have to come up with more. I only had 3.
Well, I mean, we've done 2 of mine, so we can just do one of mine and stop there if you want.
Sounds good.
Okay. I base the magical system of my fantasy world on the culinary arts, where spells are cast through cooking and baking. There are 8 elements in my magical system. All but one of the 8 elemental gods are sleeping.
I'm going to say 1 is true because I want it to be true so badly because that's awesome.
Which, let's see, I think I saw her pop in here. Joanne, I saw her pop in. Hello. Joanne writes culinary-based romances, so that would be perfect.
I love that. I feel like 2 has to be true because if 2 were untrue, 3 would also be untrue because they both have 8. So I guess 3 is untrue.
Is true.
3 is the lie.
Is 3 is the lie? Oh, okay. No, number 1 was the lie.
No. Well, now I want to do that.
I know. When I came up with it, I was like, and it was longer than the other 2 sentences. I was like, oh, if this was a quiz, like if you could see it on a test, usually the wrong answer is the right one or the wrong one.
You really got it out there. I'm like, that's so specific and so cool. Sunshine by Robin McKinley is a vampire romance where the girl is like works in a bakery, and I'm so obsessed with the way she describes the food and the baking and the lore in that book that
my alternate point of view story that I wrote for my novel, the male main character, he likes to bake, so I spent a lot of time in the kitchen writing his scenes, so it was already on my head when I came up with the lines.
I feel like I shouldn't ever write a baker character because I would end up just in the kitchen making everything that they said that they were making because I would just have to have it.
Try it out. Yeah. Well, I did put in there something that I like to make, which is he just takes dough and he rolls it and then fries that and then rolls it in cinnamon and sugar. So I mean, it's like little donuts. So I was like, I can make that. I can make that today.
I love that.
I don't know if I don't know where I left off. Is 1 the lie? I think that might have been for what I just said. So yeah, it was the lie.
It's the lie.
1 sounds awesome, but I think 3 is the lie. So I do have 8 elements. It's my magic set on 8 elements, and each one is by a god, and 7 of the gods are sleeping, so they're not in the world, or they're not awake in the world.
That's really fun.
Yeah. I mean, I've started to refer to cooking as alchemy and potion making, and it's been 16% less mature.
I love that. I'm gonna have to do that because every day at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get into the kitchen and make dinner. But if I'm like, oh, I have to go practice my alchemy,
yeah,
I think I would like it better.
Rachel, didn't you send me? You sent me an Instagram reel where it was an author saying instead of going to the grocery store, instead you're going to, and it was something magical or whatever. And like she was replacing all these normal things you do every day with magical things.
You got to romanticize it, make it fun. Yes, I always used to joke that Nate from Beauty and the Blade was a pretzel character, because he's salty on the outside, but he's actually soft on the and sweet on the inside. And one my best performing TikTok of all times was me making pretzels and being like, watch me make my main character. And then I made soft pretzels.
Oh, that is so awesome. I love that. Did you put that up like somewhere for people to watch or whatever? Like when you're saying that?
I posted on TikTok, but.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah, Rachel says I may have. Life is an adventure. You make it. Definitely.
It is.
We did have a question. You guys, if you have any questions for the author, you can go ahead and ask them anytime. Drop a Q in front of it so I know that it's for the author. And the one question that we have is from Rachel. What was the hardest part to write in your favorite book? Well, first you have to tell us what is your favorite part or your favorite book, and then the hardest part.
Oh my goodness. Picking a favorite book is so hard.
I just always default to my most recent one.
Yeah. I think Beauty and the Blade is still my favorite. It holds something really special for me. I almost said Chaos and Crowns, which is one of my books that's in my unpublished series, because that one hit me hard. But I think Beauty and the Blade is just my favorite because it's just classic. It was one of those cases of writing the book that you want to read, and it feels comfortable and wonderful. But the hardest part to write, the end. And I think that's like a universal thing for me. I have a very hard time writing the ending of books because you have to like let go of the characters and like know that, their stories go on. It's not like everything stops, but like you're not going to be there. Like you don't have to tell everybody every single detail about what happens in their life going forward. So I have a hard time ending a book.
I can see that. When I wrote my trilogy, it was an ongoing story arc through the 3 books. and you carried characters over from each book to each book, and you had their points of view again. So I felt like, okay, that's fine. Finish book 1, finish book 2, got to the 3rd book, and I was like, I don't want to end this. This means this is the end. I'm done with these characters. So
I know. I'm writing the 3rd book in a set of interconnected standalones right now, because it's this series, and if you're halfway through, you've met Rosin, right? The redheaded girl.
Oh yeah.
That lives in the den. The 3rd book is from her point of view, and it is, even though it's not the same characters as the main characters, like everybody is still there, and I'm still so attached to the world that I'm in like the last 2 chapters of the last book in this series. I tell you, I'm like having a hard time being like, oh my gosh, I have to like gently let them just go into the eternity of living in your readers' minds. It's really hard.
Yes, I can see that for sure. And Rachel says, I'm not feeding the birds. I'm strengthening an alliance with the chickadee queen.
Yes.
Love that. All right. Well, we are through the question and answers, but if anybody out there wants to still ask a question, you can. Oh, we got one. For both of you, what inspired your characters and which one or ones were the hardest to flesh out? So, I'll let you go first.
I feel like, like most authors, I feel like every character is me to a certain degree, because you have to climb into their heads. But interestingly, the characters that are the most like me, I have had the hardest time writing. So Rosin, who's the character I'm writing right now, is similar to me, and Odell from my other series was also much more similar to me. And it was like it was harder climbing into their heads. Well, because I was kind of already in there, so I felt like I overthought a lot more what they would be like. Whereas Contessa, she's my sister, 100%. Like, I'm not entirely sure I planned it that way, but Contessa has the personality of my older sister. And I had a lot easier time writing her.
I think what Susan just said, same for me. Almost all my characters have a little bit of me in them. Probably more the female characters than the male characters. And I'd have to say there's probably like a thread of my husband and all of the main male characters, right? The main love interest, the male characters. But the hardest one so far for me is the one I'm writing right now. And it's going to be 4 interconnected books, and they're going to be like their own story, except for the 4th one. And the 4th one has to be read after the other 3, but the other 3 can be read in any order because the other 3 take place all at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it's 4 brothers. They're all been cursed to marry over and over and over again. They're immortal. So they see their wives die, and they don't get to choose who their wife is. And so we're first with the first brother. He's broody and moody about everything. So we're done with him. Okay. Now we're with the second brother. And I felt like this brother is like the most well-adjusted. Like he's, done the best. He tries to make it the best of the situation. And so I went into writing the book, and I'm like, he's too much of a goody two-shoes. He's boring.
That can be hard.
So I was like, I had to do something. I'm like, come on now, 1,000 years of a curse, marrying over and over again. So that has to mess with your psyche in some way. So how does it mess with them? So I had to like really dig in there. And I've written tons of chapters that my critique partner has seen. And she's like, I love all these, but I don't think they really help the book. And I'm like, but I need to know him.
They help you. And that means they help the book. Even there's a lot of scenes that end up on the cutting room floor that are really important to have written. Yeah. But, I mean, I'm having a lot of fun with this book because for the first time I really feel like I'm writing a love interest that's pretty much an insert of my husband. We're writing a short king, so I'm very excited for that.
A short king? Like stature short?
Yes, he's a short guy. I'm 6 feet tall and my husband is 5'8", and I feel like we don't have
average size for a male, right? Or pretty close to average size.
Yeah.
But to him,
we just don't have enough representation of couples where the girl is taller, and so I'm having fun with it.
Interesting. Yeah. I like that. I like that, having that different representation in there for sure. So, yeah, I didn't realize as much of the representation part until my readers start pointing out how they liked my character from this recent book, but she's anxious all the time, and she has a counting thing. Like I have a counting thing, but I just count because it's just something I just do in my head all the time. I count, I add, divide. I don't get the right numbers, but I do it all the time. So I have a numbers thing, and so I thought, oh, that'd be cool to give it to a character. So I gave it to her. But I gave it to her whenever she's the most anxious. She counts and counts and counts, and then someone's like, well, this is like anxiety representation. I do this when one of my readers said that I do this when I get anxious. I count. I was like, oh, so I was able to, kind of use that for my marketing because I never even thought about that.
Yeah, sometimes the readers point out things. You're like, oh, I thought that was just people.
Yeah. Lovely Complex did a tall girl, short boyfriend to lovers romance really well.
Oh,
So that must be the name of the book. Nice. All hail the short king. Oh,
I'm
love
very
that.
excited.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and move into our writing sprint. And again, it's the author's choice. Susan decided that not to have a prompt, which is fine. That means that we can work on whatever we want to work on. Do you know what you're going to work on?
We were working on the end of this book.
Get that ending done.
The third book in the Talented series. I'm within the last 2 chapters, and it's like I said, that's always the hardest for me. So I need the push of a sprint to get me closer.
Alrighty. I have even opened up my document because I just finished this alternate short story, which it was supposed to be a short story. It's not a short story. It was 76,000 words by the time I finished. So I called it my not short story. But I just finished that.
That's just a novel.
Right. It's just a novel at this point, but it just feels weird to say novel when in my head, it was like a short story for so long. But I did open the novel that I'm supposed to be working on, the second book in the series, a couple days ago, and I was like, oh, I need to delete some of these chapters. So I don't know.
Are you in a deletion sprint where we're going for negative word counts?
Maybe that's what I'm doing. I'm gonna go through and start deleting stuff. Sounds like a good idea. I need to do that because I'm already at like 70-some thousand words, and they're just like probably about a third of the way through the book. And I'm like, no, this book cannot be 210,000 words. No, cannot be this long.
I know. I've been pretty snappy with my books thus far, in the like 80 to 90,000 word range, and I've been happy with that. But my Blood of the Sands coming out in September is 140,000, and I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, that's a big book. But apparently not.
Well, mine ended up being 141, the first book. But it was like 117, and then my alpha readers like, but we want more of this. So then it was like 120 something, and then it sent it to my beta readers, and they're like, but we want more of this. And by the time I finished, it was 141,000. I'm like, okay. But
I know that the editing definitely went up on this one.
Did it? Okay.
It was like 130, and then through edits, it got to 140. Actually, I think it was like 100 on the first draft, but I don't even count that draft.
How big is Beauty and the Blade?
Beauty and the Blade's, I think like 83,000.
Okay.
So it's not a chunk.
We got another question for you. What's the biggest challenge of writing a fresh take retelling, in your opinion?
I think it's a really good question. I feel like it's finding the balance between what's familiar and what's fresh, because I've definitely, it's a retelling, and so you do want it to be fresh and different, but also people are coming to a retelling because there's comfort in those classic tales. And so I'll admit I'm a bad author. I have read some of my reviews. I know we're not supposed to do that, but I've seen them. And some people say I took too many liberties from the story. And some people are like, oh, I love that it's fresh. And so I think it's just a balance of figuring out what are the essential parts of the original story to keep, to give it that familiar feel that people are there for, and what are the parts that you can play with and to make it something unique.
I have learned moving forward, because my first book in Blood of the Lily is a retelling of Snow White and Rose Red, mm-hmm. which some people didn't understand, because that's Snow White, and that Snow White and Rose Red is not the same Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was 2 different tales. But I did have people say that too, like it was not the Snow White and Rose Red that they were used to. Well, the original story, it does not, it has like a couple of red herrings that never went anywhere. So I played with those and I made them go somewhere.
Yeah.
But I did have people say the same thing, like, well, this is not really retelling or whatever. I learned after that, it's like, I'm not saying it's retelling anymore. I'm just saying it's inspired. So I just say it's Beauty and the Beast inspired. It's not a retelling, it's inspired.
Yeah.
So,
I think I have started using reimagining. Because I feel like a lot of stuff that makes it feel like the story to me is more thematic than it is like actual story beats. So like the one I'm writing now, The Hood and His Thief, I feel like it's thematically very Robin Hood, but does it follow, all the story beats of Robin Hood and His Merry Men? No.
Yeah. Well, not that, you also, a lot of these stories have multiple retellings early on that were accepted as like the original, but they were slightly different than the other one. So like Beauty and the Beast, right? You have the original that was written, and then 40 years later, there was another one who said, oh, that story had stuff in it that didn't need to be there. So they cut it out and they did other things with it. So they made a new one. And that new one's mostly what the Disney one is based off of.
Yeah,
So,
there's so many. And I remember I was at an author retreat and I had a friend who was also writing a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And so she started by reading the original like French version of it. And she was sitting there and she kept turning to me and being like, oh my gosh, did you know that? Did you know that?
yeah. I always tell people that what does get me is that the prince, they try to make him look like a good guy that just ran into a bad situation in the Disney version. No, I mean, he chose a bad thing in the Disney retelling. But in the original version, he did nothing wrong. He just didn't sleep with a fairy that wanted him.
Yeah, and in the original, they're also like cousins, they find out.
Oh, yes.
Thing. And
yeah,
also
well,
sisters.
I read like someone like broke that down. Like, because she's supposed to be like just a peasant, and then they find out she's actually like his cousin, a princess or something.
Yeah.
And they thought that the author might have decided to throw that in there last minute so that the king or prince was marrying a princess and not just a commoner. And it'd be more acceptable.
That is what I had heard too, because like at the time it was not the romantic Cinderella story to have the commoner marry the prince. It was like, no, that would lower his station.
Thanks for asking that question. I was trying to come up with a question. Oh, I appreciate that, Nikki. Honestly, I was trying to think of a fresh take on what's already out there and the best way to make it that's easier. My personal thought is that I take like the plot points, I look at them, and I also look at the thematic elements, and I look at symbolism that's in the story, and I try to carry that forward. But it's all as digested and viewed through your character's eyes, and that your character is going to be different from those characters in those stories. So I think no matter what happens, it's always going to be your own. That's what I feel anyways.
I think it is important to not always get caught up in the, how do I make this more different than anything that's ever been written? Because I am, of the view that there really are no truly original stories. But the thing is no, you haven't told the story before. And you're the unique.
Your characters.
Yeah. And your point of view and the way you're going to write it is going to be different, even if it's not a completely new story. Okay. And also there are tropes for a reason. Like people like them.
People like the tropes. So, all right, are you ready to get into the sprint?
Yes.
Okay. We'll get started in 3, 2, 1, and go. And that is time. It was really soft. I didn't realize it was so low. How did you feel?
I'm good. I love doing sprints. I need to do them more often. I feel like I get so in the flow during them.
Yeah, they really help me, especially if I'm right in the middle of a writing project. I can get a lot done and get concentrated because concentration is hard for me. I have to like really get in there and get that concentration going, and then I can get really focused. And then I write a lot, but if I don't get that focus, then that doesn't happen.
I know. I tend to write in binges, just like I read in binges. Like I don't write for a little bit, and then I write, 10K words in a weekend. And
Right. Yeah. My critique partner and I, we call it writing in seasons. So, our author business is like in season. So like write, and then we're drafting, and then, or we're editing and revising, and then we're doing author business stuff. And then we might be writing again, but it's like never all at the same time.
yeah.
So, but we had a few more people come in. So I want to say hello real quick. Where we left off here. Joanne, she was finding this short that was about Beauty and the Beast and a twist on it. So we'll go check it out a little bit. But I think I'm making a story out of that retelling. Yay, you're still sprinting. Thanks, Jocelyn. How are you? And then author L. Hollingsworth. Hello. Hope all is well. And Amanda has a question for you. What's the best advice or method you have found that helps you when the words just won't flow? Do you experience writer's block, and how do you navigate that?
I feel like I would say that I haven't had like a real experience of writer's block until very recently, actually. And I think for me, this is mixed advice. So take this with a grain of salt because it's worked for me and it hasn't. I've had times where I sit down to write a story and the story isn't happening and the story isn't happening. And when that happens, I'm like, okay, let me work on some other project that inspires me, just to try to like get the words flowing again. And then I'll bring it back. So I've been like, I'll just kind of like play around on a short story or a bonus scene to just like get the words rolling. And I will tell you, I was trying to write the last book in The Talented, and I was having writer's block. And that's when I started writing Blood of the Sands. And a couple months down the road, I had 140,000 words of Blood of the Sands and still none of this book. So, I mean, take it with a grain of salt. But I did come back to this one, and it's going much better now. So, sometimes your writer brain might be telling you that you need to work on something else for a while. So yeah, I have too many projects going at the same time, but it works for me. It keeps me from getting burnt out to, bounce around a little bit.
I had 11 projects going last year. I finished 4 of them.
It's not quite that bad.
And that was concentration issues most of the time. Just like, okay, I'm going to go. And are you a plotter or a planner plotter, planner, or pantser, or somewhere in between?
I'm a plantser. Okay. I would say my outlines are about like 12 bullet points. That's what I normally go in. So I know what the ending is going to be when I start.
Yeah.
And I know like the big beats, but I don't know all the details. And I had another author friend call it the flashlight method, where you are familiar with a flashlight. So you know where you're at. And as you're writing, like the chapter in front of you reveals itself to you, but you don't have like it planned all the way to the end. So I do end up with a more thorough outline as I go, because like I'll write the first chapter and then I'll be like, oh wait, and then this is what's going to happen in the next few, and it kind of figures itself out
from there. So a bit of a discovery writing method.
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of think of myself as discovery writer / intuitive writer. I usually take like a lot of handwritten notes, and it's so funny. I'll go back and read them later after the book is done. I was like, oh wow, none of that made it in there.
That's definitely happened to me.
Yeah, but I like that. I think there's only one book I outlined that was Blood of the Lily, my first and my debut that I published. It's not the first book I've written, but the one I published, and I outlined it to death because I was like, okay, I'm publishing this one. It's got to be right. And by the time I went to go write it, I was so bored. I was like, I've written this book. I know everything that happens.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I definitely like it. But there is something to be said for those who are able to plot. Like you can, like I have a friend who plots everything. Like he knows which chapters, he even knows how long his chapters are going to be. And he gets in there, he writes it, it's done. And he knows when he's going to finish. He knows when he's going to need a reader and an editor. And like, can't tell you, and that's going to be for me.
Yeah, my personal favorite is when people think that like chapters mean something to me. Like I don't just write the book and, go with the natural breaks in the stories for the chapters. Like, I definitely don't outline in chapters. And the best part is when a reader or like somebody will come to me and they're like, oh, I'm on chapter 16 and blah, blah. I'm like, I have no idea what happens in chapter 16. You need to tell me what's happening in the book. The chapter number means nothing to me.
I've done that too. They'll tell me a chapter. I go look at a book. Like, where are they at?
Like, I don't even know how many chapters my book has.
Oh yeah, I have figured out just from all the writing that I've done in the last couple of years. I've looked at my stats and my numbers because I'm a numbers person, so I'm constantly looking at numbers. That I always try to end. One of my two truths and a lie was going to include the statement I don't like odd numbers because I don't like odd numbers. So I try not to use odd numbers. I don't try to end on an odd number chapter, but I don't like plan my chapters like this chapter this has to happen, this chapter this has. I don't plan that way. So like if I end up on an odd chapter number, then I try to add something more to the story. But I do know that from all of my numbers and everything that I have roughly 1,500 words per chapter. So I say pretty consistent with that.
Yeah. So. Okay. So those are pretty, I think I normally do like about a 3,000 to 4,000 word chapter. I do slightly longer chapters, but I do less of them. I don't have a lot of chapters in my books normally.
Yeah. See, I have a lot of chapters.
Well, as of yet, all of my currently written books are limited third person point of view. So like single POV third. But my Blood of the Sands is the first one when I've done dual first person point of view.
Yeah.
And that does change things because, you want certain things to be told from certain characters' points of view. And so I will say that shortened a lot of chapters. It also lengthened some though, because there are parts where they're like of the book where the two main characters are like across the country from each other. And then I'm like, oh, this is a slog and this is a slog. But then when they're together, things tend to alternate faster.
It goes faster. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I do mine as alternate dual POV, but I still stick with third person limited. I've tried first person, but I just can't get into it. I don't know why.
Yeah, I kind of set it up as an exercise for myself because, I was trying to get out of writer's block. So I was like, I need to shake it up in my head. So I'm going to do like first person alternating POV, something, second world, which is what I haven't done before. And I did fix my writer's block, just not on the project I meant to, but
There are some people who don't believe writer block exists.
I'm not entirely sure about that. Yeah. I feel like I've had a little bit of block recently, but a lot of it has been due to usually writer's block of like the actual, wow, I can't get any words down on anything. Sort is because of things going on in my outside life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I find is usually something outside influence is what's stopping me from being able to write.
Yeah, like I've had some issues. Like I'm doing my PhD and I'm defending my dissertation on March 21st. So
good luck.
Thank you. I've also just had some like mental exhaustion of like, I wrote my whole dissertation. That was a lot.
Yes.
And so even though I sit down and I'm like, I haven't done any fiction today, like sometimes your brain's just tired.
Yeah, it's just tired. There's a few comments here. I just want to go through these. Alice says, I apologize for missing most of your stream. It's all right. I was here at the beginning and got distracted. Yep, see, I got focus issues too, so I understand.
Distraction is real.
The same way with outlining. The trash goblin brain is all, we already wrote the story. Why are we doing this again?
I know. I've been saying this book is almost done for months now because I finished the outline and I like knew exactly how it was going to go. That's not true.
Yeah.
I consider the book already written. It's not.
Discovery writing is very helpful. I agree.
Yes.
I think a dance, try to remember what this stands for. This is her book, A Dance of Mist and Fury. Has 95 chapters. Or somewhere around there. But the evil voice in my head suggested fluffing it out a bit to make it 100 chapters. No, it's a big book. It's a really big book.
That's big.
Question. Hardest part of transitioning from third POV to first? Ooh, I want to know the answer to this too.
I had the problem of being in dual first. My two characters, the point of view didn't end up at the same depth on the first draft. So I have a male main character and a female main character, and I was very deep POV with him, and I was slightly less deep POV with hers. And so coming to decide where I needed to be, like how far under their skin am I going? And I decided to take hers deeper, which was surprisingly hard. I guess I really connected more to what was going on with him in terms of his personal journey during this book. So it was easier than I thought it was going to be in some ways. and it was also harder because like the way you have to approach internal monologue is very different when it's first person, because anything that is written on the page in first person that is not an action is automatically an internal monologue, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's hard for me to get that. Like, I feel like I start writing it and like we talked about how we're kind of in our characters a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So when I've written first person, I feel like it's more me and I find myself boring and I'm like, who's going to read this?
Yeah, I understand that. So. I agree. I think when we relate to our characters more, that means we're also more critical of them. And I fell into that trap really badly with Odell from Chaos and Crowns. I was like, no one's going to like this character.
So, and Beauty and the Blade is only the one POV, right? It's just Contessa. So far, it's just her.
Yeah.
I've read some books where it's like mostly the whole book is like one point of view, and then all of a sudden at the end you get another one. So I don't know if that was coming, but
no, I've stuck single POV for all of my books up until Blood of the Sands.
Okay, cool. With A Dance of Miss Fury, I had dual POV since Quan's off doing stuff and not waiting around for someone to fall for him, but it felt too weird to make his POV first as well. So I kept it. So you have a first and a third POV. Her book hasn't quite come out yet. It was a Kickstarter, so she's getting it fulfilled now. So I have one coming. I don't have it yet. I really thought I did have it because I had a dream that I had it. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I've read some first and third, and I think it is interesting because I think it gives you the sense that the character that's written in first is more the main character, and then the other character is less the actual main character, but that story is being told because like important stuff is happening, but less because it's about their personal experience. I mean, that might not be the case, but that's kind of the way I've interpreted it in the past.
Yeah, I can actually see that. I mean, that makes sense. And I've done a lot of research into deep POV, deep third POV, limited third POV. I don't know if it's kind of like trying to get into that, which makes it more like first person. But
yeah, exactly. I haven't written my third POV hasn't been very deep, so
I agree. I love her cover, and it's like there's more to see. Like when you first look at it, it just looks like, I mean, I don't know, maybe because I'm getting old, my eyes are getting old, but at first it just looks like a chess piece. And then I'm like, no, there's a shadow in there. Oh, it's like a woman. And oh my, so it's like, there's more and more to see as you get closer to it.
These covers were difficult. I will tell you, I had like a vision, but I'm not a super visual person. I think it's because I have really bad eyesight, but so getting to this point with this cover was difficult, but I love it so much.
Yeah, I do too.
I just got the first draft of the cover for the third book back, and it's going to be good too.
It follows the same red, white, and black theme.
Yeah, and the same silhouette, because in the first one we have the chess piece, and then this one we have the wolf.
The wolf, yeah.
With the girl inside. So.
And the other one's Peter Pan. So is that like a Peter Pan silhouette?
It's.
You don't have to tell me if you don't want to.
It's Robin Hood.
Oh, that's what I meant. Robin Hood. Why did I think Peter Pan?
You know, they're in there. They both were green in the Disney version.
Let's do that too.
It is playing cards.
Oh, I like that. That leads me, because I've done a Kickstarter. I'm like, ooh, you could do like playing cards to go with that if you did a Kickstarter book.
I know. I'm thinking about doing a one of my upcoming projects. Maybe would be a Kickstarter omnibus for these three. Because they're not that big, so they would go really well in an omnibus. So
yes, and you could get like the pretty sprayed edges and stuff. Oh, that would go really well.
Yeah, that might be on the horizon. It's not official, but
that'd be cool. I did want to ask one more question. So since I did find out before we came live here, this was traditionally published before, or did this one go straight to self-publish?
This was traditionally published up until the very beginning of January.
Okay, so did it have a different cover or?
No, it had the same cover. I managed to bring my covers with me.
Oh, that's good.
I would have been so sad. I love these covers.
Well, when you said it was a lot to try and get the cover right, I was like, oh, did you self-publish it with a new cover? So when you traditionally published it, then you had some say over what your cover looked like? Yeah.
I was very involved in the cover process.
Oh, nice. Because you hear that's like one thing you don't have control over usually if you self-publish or if you traditionally publish. You don't.
Yeah, I think it depends. It depends on the company and the group and what you negotiate in your contract. Cool.
All righty. Well, let me just check, make sure we're on track here. So before we end the show, we wrap up. Before we wrap up the chat, can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on next and when it might come out? And last call for any questions for the author.
Yeah, my two projects are this last book in this series, The Hoodness Thief, and I'm planning July 28th release. And then Blood of the Sands is my next big release, first in the series. I'm planning really big things for this book. It's coming out in September. I think the 17th sounds like a great date, but you never know when any of the bigs in the industry are gonna tell you they're gonna drop a book. So, subject to change if the next Fourth Wing book or something decides to come out that day. But those are the two big projects I have coming up, and then Blood of the Sands will be the first book in a series, so there will be more following that. And then stay tuned for what I've got going on with this alien romance. I can't announce it yet, but there is spicy aliens in the future.
And so because you are doing like retellings with this series here with Beauty and the Blade, every time you say, Blood in the Sands, right? Blood and Sands. So,
yeah.
It makes me think, is it Aladdin retelling? But it's not. I didn't think it was. I think you would say that if it was, but I kept going there every time you said it.
I could see that. The Blue Sword by Robin McKinley is my favorite book of all times. I read it probably twice a year. And it's kind of homage to that. That's a very YA book. So it's like, let's grow it up. Let's make it darker. Let's add some more romance.
Some spice probably, huh?
A good amount.
Okay, well, before we end the show, can you please tell everyone where they can find you and purchase your books?
You can find me anywhere you find authors. I try to make myself very available. My most active platform is Instagram, and I also have an email newsletter that is one of the best places to stay posted. If you like talking to other readers, I have a Facebook group and a Discord for my readers to hang out in and chat about all my books. And my books are on KU, so Kindle Unlimited. They're Amazon exclusive for the ebook, but the paperbacks are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, bookshop.org, all those good places.
All right. Dropping the last link to your Facebook group in the chat.
I know, I got a lot of links. I try to make myself as available as possible. Right. And it means that I have 50 links. I'm like, oh, I'm on Threads, I'm on TikTok, I'm on wherever you want to find me. And I make it real simple.
So Rachel says, you know what they say about alien romances?
What do they say?
They're out of this world.
They're out of this world. They are out of this world.
Margaret's like, what?
I've been having a lot of fun with it, I'll tell you. It's been one of those refreshing things in terms of just writing something different to get your creative juices flowing.
And if you guys like fantasy romance with slow burn that is based on Beauty and the Beast, and so far there's not been for those who have just come into the show, I started reading this last night at around 10:30 or so, between 10:30 and 11, and I couldn't put it down. I finally told myself to go to bed at 1, but I was back up again reading it. I'm right over about halfway through the book. I really love it. There's not a slow moment. I love this book so far. So this has been one of my favorite books that I've picked up that I didn't know of until the show. So
thank you. I guess I gotta shout about it better so people know it exists.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And Robin McKinley. Margaret likes Robin McKinley.
Yes, favorite author of all times.
Hello, Ben. How are you doing? You're late. That's okay. You can rewatch it. I should just post a cardboard cutout graphic of myself on other platforms.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Shannon's asleep at 10:30. What happened? I know I'm usually asleep at by 8:30. But no, I was sitting there looking at my newsletter, trying to figure out what I was going to write until late. So
newsletters are hard.
I mean, I like when I finish them, I really like them. What I finally decided to write about was the current book I'm writing on. I decided it's a Little Mermaid reimagining. I'm gonna take your word. And one thing I didn't like about any of the stories is that, the mermaid's falls in love with the prince on first look. And so I was like, okay, I know we can have strong feelings for someone when we first see them or meet them, but I wanted them to have a common interest. And so I came up with the idea that they have a common interest in stars. And so there's one point where they both are looking at constellations, but they have different stories that go with the constellations. And I like the idea of how a lot of our constellations are Greek mythologies, and where the stories come from. So I was like, hey, here's one constellation, 2 stories. Which story do you like better? So I sent that out and I've had a lot of my subscribers reply to it. So I'm like, yeah, this works.
That's really fun. I like that.
Yeah. But I kind of just sit there looking at my screen for a while. What am I going to do this time?
I like putting a recipe in mine. That's been one of my things.
Yes. She said, Right.
I will
Is so
tell you
good.
the male main character in Beauty and the Blade is a little bit less of a rake. When you move on to book 2 and have Little Red Shadow, we have a rake for all of you lovers.
Yeah, but he's like, he's got like that slightly dangerous damage edge to him that I like.
Yes.
Yeah. So I like it.
A little rough around the edges.
Yeah. I like it. So yep, there's the cover. It's beautiful. Cover. Oh, that's what you said already. I did that one. I'm in. Yeah, I love this book. I couldn't put it down. I'm hoping. I was like, I need to finish it today. I'm like, wait, I got another author tomorrow. I should probably pick up her book.
I got a good book too.
So, all right, let me take this off the screen. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us, and thank you so much for joining me today, Susan. It was so nice to meet you. Yes, and learning about a little bit more about your book, especially since I was able to have a chance to start reading it and love it. And it was interesting, I think, knowing and learning that you went from traditionally published to self-published and what that transition looked like. So
it was fast. I learned a lot.
And let me see any other questions for the author. This was lovely. Thank you for doing this. I really enjoyed hanging out with you too. Lovely to meet you, Susan.
You as well.
All right. Tomorrow we do have another author on. It's a little bit earlier in the morning, 9 a.m. in the morning, 10 a.m. Eastern time. And that was with B.L. Brown, who will be on the show. All these buttons I got to hit. Hit the right one. All right. That'll do us. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Bye.